Literature should make you think or feel something.
Writing that asks questions and the reader must figure out the deeper understandings.
Literature is a popularity contest. Writers who have achieved fame and whose pieces are known by a large population. What we incorporated into our lives.
Non-fiction, fiction, poetry, letters, written things, countless genres and writers/artists, essays, speeches, government documents. Care 7.
Society decides what is literature and what is not. I believe that currently literature will not be considered literature until some time passes, allowing the work to spread across the eyes of many people who will analyze it and critique it for what it is worth.
Read by many and analyzed different types of literature will either have a moral or life lesson to the end, an emotional point that is trying to be made, or story that grabs the audience emotionally or just makes them think. Original written or artfully expressed work or creation that is a moral or life lesson.
Either through context of the meaning or the words used, that some sort of historical lesson be taught through the piece. Figureheads of literature.
With the right kind of friends and the right kind of life story. Plus your writing doesn't get thrown in a fire and destroyed before at least hundreds of people read it, then you can become a literary figurehead, too. This just bothers me. Big name authors are not always the best authors.
Literature causes some sort of emotion or feeling within someone. Something you yourself can relate to or just think it's literature.
A liquid term that cannot really be applied to a certain number of books or plays.
Even though I am not a fan of her work, I think it does carry literary value and should be included.
Nobody's opinion is better than anybody else's. So determining the status of different writing seems really complicated and totally absurd.
In order to become a great writer who is remembered for years to come, one must become very sad and ultimately kill themselves. It's a good career move.
It should be written and that it should have universal interest, because if a piece is not relevant to anyone or anything, then what is the point of reading it? I think it should make one reflect and must be applicable to human life.
I have found horror to be a very thought-provoking form of literature.
Fun.
Evoked such immediate emotional responses, it is up to opinion. Literature is meant to evoke emotions within the reader, an entirely open-ended question.
An insurmountable task why the author has created this piece of work and how we can apply these lessons to our own lives to better the world in general. A form of art.
Has to be considered nice to read by enough people. While generalizing seems like a good idea, I think that this might confuse people on the definition of literature even more. Some written form of text that evokes emotions or thoughts that we might not normally find ourselves dwelling on.
According to my criteria, it is interesting and is very relevant to us as Americans, and to a greater extent as Oklahomans. The art of the written word.
To express ideas through the excellence of prose or verse. Is anything that can allow you to learn more about yourself and change you into a more understanding and accepting person. We can discover things about ourselves by reflecting on what we read and how it applies in our life.
In such criteria that you can think it would be subjective. We teach literature in schools, not just to teach literature, but to teach critical and abstract thinking.
Where would you put them in the spectrum? I think we could conclusively narrow down what is worthy written word and what is just written. Is it really entirely necessary to decide what is literature? Society is going to remember what influences them, just as people do.
Anthologies, in a sense, are a lot like music festivals. How does a music festival succeed? By grouping together a bunch of artists of a particular genre and making them play one after another. By picking a certain genre of music, it is possible to appeal to an entire group of people. Every anthology is created around a certain premise. In order to make an anthology that embodies English literature, one would need to search across the vast history of English literature and group together a bunch of works that are deemed literature. In order to do that, literature needs to be defined.
It actually makes things a tad easier.
The writer wasn't looking to create literature, she was just writing for the sake of writing. The readers could be credited with the actual creation of literature.